Hello, Trail Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Today, we are in for such a treat because we have with us KellyAnne, who is the founder of PlatinumEnergySystems.ca. That's PlatinumEnergySystems.ca. She has offered a fantastic discount for the listeners. So, as you're listening to her, if you decide you want to purchase her ionic detoxification foot bath, which has amazing science. We get into that and get into a lot of other things about detoxification. If you're interested in purchasing one, you can give her a call by going to platinumenergysystems.ca, or you can use the coupon code LTH. And just know that she loves talking to all of her customers. So she is totally looking forward to hearing from any of you that want to chat about heavy metal detoxification or anything that we discuss in today's interview. Enjoy today's interview. It was such a pleasure to do this. And in fact, it became a 3-hour interview because we discussed so much. So I broke it up into 2 parts. So today is part 1, and I'm going to be publishing part 2 very soon. In part 2, she gets into a lot of amazing healthy habits for supporting the body's ability to heal itself. And in today's interview, we're going to dive into heavy metals, detoxification, and how to support the body's ability to pull out all of these pollutants in the body. She has amazing stories, and I know you're just going to love learning from KellyAnne. So enjoy today's interview. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 292. Today we are in for such a treat. We have with us Kellyann Andrews, who I have become a huge fan of since we connected a few months ago. She runs platinumenergysystems.ca with her husband. For Americans, .ca is what Canadians put behind our websites. So just go to platinumenergysystems.ca. Just remember it's CA. Kellyann, I'm so excited for you to be here today. Really interesting how we connected. You saw a video interview that I was in a summit a few months ago, and you reached out to me because you had some advice for me. And if I can talk to health professional or holistic health professionals, it lights up my world. And it was really neat because you saw in my face some health issues that you wanted to point out. And I really am a believer. I know that naturopaths and Ayurvedic practitioners, many different practitioners, traditional Chinese medicine, look at the face, look at the eyes, the skin color, and they can see, almost like reading a palm, they can see the internal health reflected in the face. And you had some great advice for me. I've taken your advice. It's wonderful. Thank you. I really actually see it working. And after having a nice long conversation with you and subsequent emails, I asked you to be on my show. And it was really cool how it turned out that there was a 6 degrees of separation, that we knew we were friends with and knew similar practitioners, colleagues in this small world of holistic health practitioners. And so it was just so neat to connect with you. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to you sharing with my listeners all of your wonderful information. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Lovely to be here.
Absolutely. And it's so cool that you ended up listening to some episodes and told me how much you loved them and how great, they were. Very conversational, which is my favorite way to have an interview. Feel like all the listeners are just sitting with us in a living room having a great conversation. We're all part of the party. And so I hope we get to have that same experience today. Kellyann, I'd love for you to start by sharing your story. You've been in medicine for over 40 years, and I'd love to know what prompted you to want to do that as a career, as your life's work. What led you to be so passionate about it, and just share with us the different things you've done in your past that led up to what you're doing today.
Well, like many of us on this path, we all came here because of the need, and mine was caused by extreme health conditions. When I was very young, I had very bad asthma and allergies. Both parents were chain smokers, and because I grew up in the 50s, one of those baby boomers, when food wasn't in the awareness that it is now, and lifestyle wasn't understood either, we, grew up on Campbell soups, TV dinners, and, not great food. So as a child, I had extreme asthma and allergies. And then later in life, in my 40s, I was really crippled by arthritis, gout, and rheumatism because of both sides of the family having that genetic disposition. And I was in a very stressful state at that time. Because I was in an environment that was having extreme floods, and we had the threat of losing our entire house and being 30 feet under. So that kind of stress level will just, as you know, ignite the wrong epigenetics to be occurring and turn on all the bad genes because of the extreme stress levels. As we know, that when you're in a hyper stress state or hyper sympathetic nervous system orientation, then it just ignites all of the inflammation in the body. And so in my early 40s, I could hardly climb up a flight of stairs. My husband had to put my socks and shoes on. I jokingly now say, although at the time it wasn't very funny, I was like the Tin Man without oil in Wizard of Oz. But because of my health journey and to discovery of what is the core cause of disease, I went down the path of wellness to investigate how do you create wellness at the cellular level. And I can tell you that the joy of the experience is that at age 61, I now take the stairs two at a time, have mobility and agility I didn't have in my 20s. Plus, I had a series of car accidents in my life that my poor body endured. But also, that at 60, my gray hair has turned dark again.
I love it. I love it. So many people don't know that you can reverse the gray hair, and that
Yes.
it's not about vanity.
No,
That your hair turning gray is a sign that there's other deficiencies and other issues going on that can cause cardiovascular disease. And so by you reversing that, you know that you've also healed internally.
exactly. Well, what was also occurring was, 20 years ago when I did have my hair dyed, I would just feel absolutely horrid after having my hair dyed. And then I came to understand that, of course, in the hair dyes is a huge amount of heavy metals. And about that time or a little earlier, I experienced one of the bad dentists who pretended to be a biological dentist and to be able to take mercury out of the mouth, in the correct fashion. Well, it turned out not only wasn't doing none of those procedures, and I was not well educated enough at the time to know that, but also he did it too quickly, and I ended up with mercury blackouts. So if there was anything that really put me on this path, it was that experience of being absolutely crippled. I always jokingly say, like in Star Trek, I felt like Data when they took his chip out of his shoulder and he would just like sort of conk out. And I would have that. I'd be driving on a freeway and I have to pull over and just literally conk out and then come to consciousness later. And so the memory was going and the fogginess of the brain and closing the bathroom door when I went to close the cabinet door, like the circuitry in the brain just wasn't working. And to me, that was incredibly scary. But even in my 20s, I knew that I had a lot of heavy metal exposure because of the fact that I had some hair analysis done and I had, high levels of many different metals. But what was scary was not only having them, but at the time, they had no methodology to get them out. And that was even more terrifying. So I went down this amazing journey of biochemistry because my background is biochemistry and nursing and 40 years in alternative medicine. So because I was already in the field and had, science orientation myself, I went investigating, what were the core causes of disease? What were the core causes of wellness? So of course, then it brought me down to cellular level of the body. And so anything that was making the cell healthy and enabling it to rejuvenate was the path I wanted to go on. And, get off the path that I was on, which, my parents' generation was totally into the, pain and gain mentality. But the consciousness was that as you age, you just naturally get ill. Well, to me as a baby boomer, that was not only not acceptable, I wasn't going down that path, and nor was I accepting that concept. So then I started getting into health, and then there was all these orientations of you had to have pain to gain. Well, I wasn't buying that theory either. I was like, okay, I want the path that gives me all gain and pain. I mean, like I want the easy, the safest and gentle method, because I experienced in my own body and my poor body, I used it as a field test for so many different things to see if they would work. And of course, many of them didn't. And I found some of the methodologies to cleanse the body or detoxify the body is just incredibly aggressive and not only irritating, but more debilitating than the original state. And to me, that was just not right. I mean, the body was already going through so much. I mean, all you had to do is put it into more of a war zone. So I just didn't accept those methodologies, and I just found them too aggressive and too intrusive and stressful, more stressing. And the sympathetic nervous system was on red alert already. Why would you antagonize it further? So as a result of my own journey, that led me to investigating the field of toxicology. And to be honest, it must have been one of those guided moments, because when I understood that the poison inside the body was just the huge trigger to so many biological and chemical responses that just caused a cascade of, alert signals to go on. And that was the problem, was these alert signals were going on in the body, and normally those alert signals would shut down. But what was occurring when this toxicity was infiltrating into the body through the lungs, through the skin, through the food, through the water, through the air, just like all roots into the body, was absorbing content that was never designed to be inside the human body. And the human body knew it was foreign and knew it was not acceptable, but it had no mechanism in which to deal with it. And that was the scary part. And so the alert signals ended up staying on. So the analogy that I use for that is that sort of like if you put your car in park and then stand on the accelerator. I mean, it just got stuck in that mode, and that's the sympathetic nervous system. And so then, of course, the healing mechanisms of the body are a lot, designed around being in a restful state, not a hyper, active state. And so that's where it leads into, the toxicity ends up causing the body to go into degenerative diseases. So that's where I was going down that same path with the arthritis, the gout, and the rheumatism. And so as a result of that, then, studying into the field of more biochemistry and recognizing, that not only were you having to deal with a life accumulation, that this content was getting into the body and it wasn't getting out. So it was building up, building up, building up. And so then it was infiltrating into all parts of the body, and it was being stored in the fat cells. But what I came to realize in having things like, deep tissue massage, that it was actually getting stuck even at the muscular level. It was getting stuck in the arteries. It was getting, into the brain, and it was affecting just literally every cell. So what we needed was a methodology that would get it out of the body safely, easily, and gently. And that was,
When you say it, you mean heavy metals and toxins?
yeah, that's right. Like agricultural chemicals, industrial chemicals, you know, all foreign content that just is not biological and not designed to be in the body, but especially heavy metals is one of the biggest problems that people are facing now.
And they don't know it.
And that's the thing that's the scariest, that there's so many people who are suffering and they don't know why, and they're suffering needlessly and they don't know what to do about it. And that's what's so awesome for what you're doing, Ashley, is, you're bringing this awareness to people. And like you, I just live to help people change. And the shift that occurs is to shift them out of degenerative diseases into rejuvenation, because the human body was designed, absolutely designed to rejuvenate. And so that whole thinking of our parents and grandparents, that you just naturally degenerate as you grow older, is not accurate. I mean, they actually ended up taking a chicken cell, put it in a petri dish, and kept it alive for 30 years. Now, I don't know what the length of life of a normal, heart cell of a chicken is, but it's not 30 years. And the only reason it stopped after 30 years was because they forgot to clean the petri dish that day. So long as they um, fueled that cell with nutrients each day, it just kept going and going and going. And we have all of these areas around the world that have proven to us, up in the Alps, up in Peru, all these areas where people live sort of alpine lives, where they have the clean water, the cleaner air, the beautiful minerals from the river being put onto the vegetables, being fed to the animals, and they just live the life of Heidi kind of thing. I mean, these people are living to amazing ages. I mean, some of them have been reporting having, women having children at 80 and 90 years old.
I have actually heard of that. I have heard of one of the naturopaths I work with is the oldest practicing naturopath, and help I mean he helped a woman get healthy, and he warned her. I mean, she was in her 70s, and he warned her because she said, I'm my feminine cycle came back, and she's laughing thinking this is like a fluke. And he said, you need to have birth control now with your husband, because you and she just laughed at him like, you're crazy. I'm in my 70s. Sure enough, she got pregnant. She did not believe him. She got pregnant and carried a healthy baby to term. And this is, I love this, pulling people out of the matrix, these like aha moments that we can have. The body has an amazing ability to heal itself, and genetically, we should all be living to 120 or more. We have the genetic ability, but it is our overtoxic world that is stifling our cells. I had this really great doctor on. I think he's like 84 years old, and he was sent home to die in his late 30s. He was 3 days away from death. His liver had shut down, and the MDs had nothing else for him. And he went home, and because his background was in biochemistry, he said, I just started to think, how does the liver detoxify? How does it work? What fuel does it need? What do I need to do to kind of get this going? And here he is in his 80s, and his whole message is very simple. If you want longevity, it's a cell is like a house. Take the garbage out, bring the groceries in. If you don't take the garbage out, that piles up, and the house doesn't work properly, right? If you don't bring the groceries in, or if something is stopping the groceries from coming in, and the garbage from going out, then the house just stops functioning. The cell stops functioning, right? And so his whole thing was, take the garbage out, meaning the heavy metals, the pollutants, the toxins, the environmental, agricultural chemicals, and all that stuff you mentioned. So we need to figure out how. I think a lot of people might think, yeah, but we've been here for how many thousands of years? Why do we have to do something out of the ordinary to remove toxins?
Here's the answer to your question, just in a real simple analogy that people can really, grasp and understand is if you use the analogy of two aquariums, and this one's just, came to me one day at one of those inspiration moments. So you got the first aquarium, and the first aquarium is full of mucky, slimy, yucky, green algae water. And everybody's sort of seeing an aquarium or, a slough or a pond or something like that. And so in that aquarium, of course, the poor little fish, isn't doing so good. Now you take that little fish out of there and you put him in a pristine, clean one. He goes from barely surviving to completely thriving. So, that's almost like a no-brainer, but why? Why is that occurring is the key. So what occurs in the slimy, mucky, yucky aquarium and what occurs in the clean aquarium are that they're two different environments. So the environment of the mucky aquarium is full of industrial chemicals, agricultural chemicals, heavy metals, and that environment causes low oxygen, high acidity, low alkalinity, and low minerals. But now you put the little fish in the beautiful, pristine, clean environment, and now you have high oxygen, slight alkalinity, low acidity, high minerals, and no pollution.
And good, healthy bacteria.
Exactly. The whole environment is just completely supportive.
Right, right. And the fish, which is, the analogy is our human body
Yeah.
thrives when we give it the environment, the internal and external environment for the best success. But coming back to people thinking, well, I think if we are 30 years old or older, we sort of think, well, can't I just do what my parents did or my grandparents did? My grandparents were healthy, they didn't need to do anything extracurricular to extract heavy metals. Like what? And so I think some people think that like they just don't have, like they don't need to, or they say, I'm healthy. Like everyone starts off by saying I'm healthy, and then they start listing their symptoms. But I have occasional migraines, but I'm healthy. Or I need to drink 3 coffees a day to function, but I'm healthy. Or you know what I mean? And so, or I'm only on 2 medications, but I'm healthy. So people have these things. Oh, it's just genetic. My doctor told me it's just genetic, or my doctor told me it's just because I'm getting older. They're not healthy, but they've accepted that this is as good as it gets. And then they look to their grandparents and go, well, we're just going to shouldn't we just keep doing what everyone else is doing or what everyone else has done? And what you're saying is that now is different. The last 30 years are much different from any other time in human history.
My hope of this call is to give people hope. But I do have to say one negative thing is that unfortunately the planet has gotten 100 times more toxic in just 30 years. And so, we are experiencing an environment on the planet that human history has never experienced ever. And it's an accumulation of all of the toxicity that is being caused by industry and just the accumulation factor of all the different things that we have created artificially in this world, and we're not getting rid of them. And so the world is gotten to such a degree of toxicity that the human body is just completely absorbing it. So it's not just what you've accumulated in your entire life that hasn't come out, but it's also what you're daily absorbing. And that is what's making the difference, because our parents and our grandparents, and even me when I grew up in the 50s, I was not exposed to the level of toxicity that children now are.
Mm-hmm. Just vaccines as an example. If you're 35 years of age or older, and you've done all the vaccines that your doctor tells you to do, you have had less vaccines in your life than a 6-month-old. A 6-month-old baby right now, born here in 2018, has had more vaccines than you have had in your entire adult life. And vaccines contain heavy metals. That's just one of many sources, right, of heavy metals.
Yes.
I learned something already from you. I dyed my hair for 15 years. Every 3 months, religiously went to the hairdresser and had my hair dyed, had my roots done, everything for 15 years. I've been suffering from heavy metal toxicity for the last few years, and I've been wondering why. Like, I didn't, my doctor, my naturopath would say to me, did you live near a farm? Did you live near factories? Did you work in a factory? Did you work near, like, did you work in the automotive industry? Like, she was asking me the obvious questions, and I kept going, no, I lived in a major city. Like, maybe I drank the city water. I had bad habits as a teenager, smoking cigarettes and drinking, I guess, some alcohol, like that kind of stuff, but I didn't do anything crazy. But now you're mentioning, dental things, like having cavities filled, and just having your hair dyed can be enough to introduce heavy metals. And of course, I had all the vaccines that I thought was good for me, which contain either mercury or aluminum. What other ways could someone be exposed to heavy metals in their lifestyle?
Yeah, well, let's take one metal as an example. Mercury is sort of very well known, but the one that isn't as well known is copper. Now, especially for your, audience, we know that the huge majority of the audience is going to be female, so we will, give this illustration for them. So what happens is that, classically in the old houses, there was copper piping. Now, we were taught early in life that, copper pans were a good thing to cook in. And then women who are on the birth control are being given copper. If they have an IUD, they're getting copper. And if they have mercury amalgam fillings, there's also copper in there. And then many pharmaceutical, drugs will have copper in them, but even your classic supplements will be a source of copper and multiple sources of copper. So, you know, and even, very wholesome foods can have a lot of copper. So what is happening is that you have a domino effect occurring, and these multiple sources are accumulating. So it's not just, when coming from one source, your body could deal with it, but when it becomes multiple sources on top of multiple sources, that's when the accumulation factor starts to occur. And so there's a huge correlation with migraine, headaches, and copper.
Fascinating. When my mom had cancer and she was still alive in 2002, she sent me to see a naturopath who was a naturopath and medical doctor. And I just can't, there's only a handful of them out there because to go through medical school twice is kind of intense. And he had a clinic downtown Toronto. And I remember I did a bunch of blood tests. It was sort of like functional medicine, but they didn't have a name for it. And he did a hair analysis and he told me I had a copper toxicity. This was back in 2002. And then he wanted me to do chelation therapy. Soon after that, my mom was hospitalized and then passed away. So my world kind of turned upside down. And I looked into chelation a bit, and my intuition said, run away. But I felt like I should do something, but I didn't know what to do. And it wasn't until years later that I realized that a lot of my symptoms were heavy metal toxicity. Every time I went to lose weight, about 25 pounds into any diet, I would get huge symptoms. I would just almost not be able to function until I stopped the diet. And I didn't know, I blamed myself for years. I beat myself up thinking I'm trying to self-sabotage or there's something wrong with me. I mean, I did over 30 diets. I went to diet clinics, worked with diet doctors, everything. And then finally, through working with naturopaths, I figured out that it was heavy metals are stored in the fat tissue. And then when I went to lose weight, they would just accumulate in my blood. My liver was over toxified. My liver and kidneys just couldn't get it out. And so I would just become so overly toxic that everything would start to shut down. And my liver became damaged. It was really scary, but what was exciting was that I figured out finally in the last few years, figured out it was heavy metals. And so I started seeking ways to do this naturally. Naturopaths keep telling me I should do chelation therapy, but I'm really, my gut says don't do it. I'd love to know your thoughts on this.
A lot of naturopaths and holistic people do shy away from chelation, and I think there's multiple reasons, but one of them is, that it depletes the body of absolutely everything. And then they play more or less a guessing game on what to put back in, and if they don't do it right, if you don't have enough calcium or magnesium or whatever, you can have a heart attack. So it is a little bit of a dice game, going that way. And also the other thing is a lot of people react to the agents and just the whole methodology, and it is sort of an intrusive kind of method. And so, the interesting thing, while you were speaking, what came to mind, was one of our clients. She had a fatty liver, and her liver enzymes were like literally off the chart, and her blood sugars were so bad that they wanted to put her on insulin, so they wanted to put her on multiple different pharmaceutical remedies, and she just did not want to go down that path, and so she ended up being referred to us. But as a result of what we saw in her progress was she went back after 6 months of working with us, and she had her liver retested. And at this point, she no longer had a fatty liver. Her liver enzymes had normalized, her blood sugars had normalized. And the gift on top of everything was that she had lost 60 pounds of weight. Well, as you mentioned, the fat cells are one of the cells in the body as well as muscle, but the fat cell storage cause the toxicity. So because she was able to now liberate, the toxicity out of her body, the storage closets were no longer needed, and she released that content.
That's really exciting. I'm so excited about that. That's why I bought a sunlight and sauna, because I wanted a way of heavy metal detoxifying heavy metals. But I know that you should be doing multiple things. I'm going based on Dr. Klinghardt, who I know is one of your
Advocate.
yeah, advocates
Mhm.
and one of your customers.
Yes.
Dr. Klinghardt, who is I've had him on the show. He's world renowned. He's been practicing for over 40 years, and he helps people detoxify heavy metals all the time, especially children with, compromised immune systems, with autoimmune conditions, with autism and cancer. He helps these patients, children and adults. His main thing is he helps them to detoxify heavy metals and nutrify the body and make some lifestyle changes, and they get better. Like people, on death's door and with really complicated issues get better. And his clinic, one of his clinics, is just down the street from me. So I went and I visited. I obviously had him on the show, so I got to speak with him one-on-one, but I visited, and their protocol um is using the sauna, and they use sunlight and sauna, and then using your very specific array that you put your feet in. And they told me all about it, and they gave me the link to go look at your website and everything. And it's so funny because you called me, maybe 2 months after that. And I thought that would then we discovered on the phone together was we had that connection, that array was, you're the distributor for it for all of North America. Is that correct?
Yeah, the company is us actually, but it's actually a detox foot spa, and Dr. Klinghardt has actually said that he's called it the survival tool of the century.
He mentions it in the interview, but I mean, I just didn't know. I didn't know that was you. I didn't know you at the
Yeah,
time, but in the interview, because I interviewed him maybe 6 months ago,
yeah.
he said that yeah, I can't remember the numbers. You're gonna have to tell me. But something within when you do the treatment and you put your feet
Yes.
in it, 3 days later, the kidneys release this a certain percentage of aluminum that was just outstanding. Can you talk a little bit about that?
With our technology, we've actually, because of my science background, I have to tell you, I started on the side of the skeptics. And so, I wanted the validation. So first of all, we did the clinic, evaluations of having people have sessions and see what they were physically, how their bodies were physically responding. So we had 30 people go through and tell us what their experience was, and all 30 people had different experiences. And so that just fascinated me, being a field biologist by nature. And, when I was like 6 years old, I was raising tadpoles to watch them change to frogs and wondering what caused man's metamorphosis. And so, I always jokingly say I was born a biologist. So, my field study, my biggest field study is by my own body, but watching other people and seeing, what they're doing and what's working. So I went down this major journey of discovery of, what really works. And so when we field tested 30 people and they all had different experiences, I was just like sort of scratching my head what was happening. So then we went to test it medically. And so then what we did was so this is a detox foot spa, but it's the original one. And so what happens is that when you put your feet into the water in warm salt water, saline solution, you literally open up the sweat glands. So it's actually is a sweating process. So, but the Korean sweat glands are in your hands and your feet. So, but it's a door of exit for the lymphatic system. Now, one of the key things as to why people are getting sicker and sicker and sicker is that their detox systems in their body, the liver, the kidneys, the lungs, the skin, you know, um, the gallbladder, all of those organs and systems are getting clogged up. And even a cardiologist who uses our system in his clinic, because he realizes that if people have problems with their circulatory system or their heart, it's because they're literally clogging up with internal pollution. So what is happening is the exit routes out of the body are literally log jamming, beaver damming. So the lymphatic system is one of the key factors of the whole way the body is designed to detox. So if you think of the lymphatic system of being a lava tube system in a mountain, so you've got this core content, lava at the center of the mountain, and you need to release it to the surface. So the lava tubes of the body are like the lymphatic system, and that's how the body detoxifies itself. So our technology actually ties into this mechanism that is already designed by the body. But unfortunately, what is occurring is that it's clogging up with massive molecules. So in our system, the reason that it's different is because we have multiple technologies. So it's not just metal components sitting in the basin. It's got multiple interventive technologies designed behind it to assist the body to open up these drainage routes. And once the drainage routes open, then the content can be released. And that is what makes this system different from any other methodology. But it's that exiting of it. So in the lab reports, what we did was the first thing, from having a science background was, okay, well, let's validate the process by running the equipment with no feet in the water as opposed to 4 different patients. And so the patients have been selected purposely because they were different ages, different lifestyles, different body issues, symptoms, different levels of toxicity, past and current. So we tried to get as many of those differentiations, as possible in the sample. And so then we ran the equipment using the same water, the same salt, the same equipment, but ran 5 sessions. And in the first session, it was only the equipment, but the other 4 sessions were with the patients. And so, for example, when we then sent the water in to be profiled, because it's not the color of the water, contrary to what you hear, the color of the water is irrelevant, really. It's the content, what's on the basin floor at the end of the session. So we had the medical lab, analyze the water post-session. In the control, no feet in the foot spa, lead, for example, was 1.7 because we used tap water and sea salt. But in the fourth client, she had 30 units of lead on her basin floor at the end of one session because, get this, she was a commercial artist who did stained glass and acrylic paints.
Wow. What kind of symptoms was she experiencing?
Yeah, now that was a very interesting case. I went to the library to return my book, and as I was giving it back to the desk, this woman collapsed behind me at the librarian's desk, which was opposite of the front desk. So we went over and picked her up, and she goes, "This always happens to me when I get around too much electricity." And so we pick her up off the floor, and as we come up over the level of the desk, in behind the librarian was the bank of computers that everybody goes online. So she just went to where the most heavy amount of electromagnetic energy was in the building, and it collapsed her. So we walked her out of the building, and you know what was so amazing was as soon as she got out of the building, boom, her legs worked again. So we walked her to the car, and I'm thinking, what's throwing her breaker switch? So I said to her, "Have you ever been analyzed for heavy metals?" And that was her. She was full of lead. I mean, she just had astronomical levels of lead, and she knew it, but she didn't know how to get it out. So she was like me when I was in my 20s and didn't know how to safely and gently get it out of her body.
Wow. So she did four, was it the four people did 4 sessions?
Well, they all did a series of sessions,
Okay.
and each of them had completely different results, and because they came to us with different kinds of conditions. So it was so amazing, somebody who had such acute sinus infections all of their life that they had no sense of smell, went home after a series of sessions, and now they could smell. He actually had to close the windows because for the first time he smelled the car exhaust, and then he got home and he could smell his lawn, and he went in his house and they had recently painted, and now he could smell the paint. And that night he went out and he went paddling, which is like in a canoe, and he could smell the ocean for the first time in his life.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. I've heard of that some deficiencies, like I think a zinc deficiency and then also certain heavy metals can shut down the nerves, can prevent like prevent the ability to smell.
As you know, mercury is like the worst thing in the world. And so, where do they put it? They put it in the mouth, right next to the brain. Well, of course, that's gonna, all of the nervous system, all of the tissue, all of, I mean, your
Who thought
brain
that was
is.
safe? Who in their right mind went, we need to fill these cavities. Let's use the most toxic substance known to humans."
I know. Let's not even go there. We want to keep on the side of hope here.
Okay, okay.
So, I mean, it is so amazing though to be doing what you're doing, to be doing what I'm doing, and completely turning these people's lives around. It's like giving them back their life again, because when you're in a debilitated state, one of the things that I really want to, incite everybody with is that when you're in that very low, I call it when the tide is out, when you're in that very low state, you're in a very low vibratory state. And I mean, the world is just completely overwhelming and you can't deal with anything because you have zero energy, if not -10. But also, your emotional, mental being just completely collapses behind your physical. And when you're in that state, it's so easy to be completely absorbed in your symptoms and how awful you feel. But one of the things that I would highly recommend for people to do, whatever path of wellness that they're on, is to take a photograph of themselves when they were experiencing good health. And if you've never experienced good health, then take a photograph off of, like a health magazine of someone who just looks to you like the world's most vibrant, alive person you've ever seen. The vitality is just exuding from their pores. And put that on your refrigerator and stand in front of it every day and and say to your body, because the body is like a computer. It just takes the input in. It doesn't know whether it's reality or imagined. And stand in front of that photograph of you at your healthiest, or of someone who's absolutely just the perfect example of health to you, and say to your body, today, this is what we are creating. And make it a now experience, not tomorrow or sometime in the future, because then you're just putting that to a later date, but to own it in the moment.
Beautiful. Body, this is what we are creating.
Today.
What we are creating today. Love it. That is great because it has you focus on what you want to create instead of lament about all the things you don't want to have.
Yeah, exactly. See, my point of this illustration is that when you're in a debilitated state, you're watching the illness movie and you're creating the illness movie. What you want to do is switch the channel. Now start watching the wellness movie and doing the wellness habits. I call them healing habits, just daily healing habits.
I want to get into those healing habits. We're going to definitely do that so that in this episode, people can walk away today and have actionable steps to improve their health. But first, I really want to, I'm super curious about learning more about this foot array that you have. Um, Tell me about the other two because you sort of open this loop and I want to close it. Tell me about the other two people. So you had that one person who had you met at the library who was basically fainting and falling over when she was near too much electromagnetic radiation. And she was the artist.
Yep, she was an artist who did stained glass and acrylic paint, so that's where she was getting the lead
Right. And so after she did a series of working with your array,
sessions.
the
Yeah,
sessions, did was she able to be around computers, or should she still faint, or is she able to be around electromagnetic radiation?
yeah. Well, and you see the reason that she was so hypersensitive to EMF, electromagnetic sensitivity, was because she was a walking antenna.
Mm-hmm.
So, any of us have a sensitivity to it because it's not a natural frequency. It's not the body's own frequency. It's not the earth's frequency. It's not nature's frequency. It's man-made. And so, it doesn't resonate with the cells. The cells don't like it. They get irritated by it. And so now when she put more heavy metals in her body, when she, by her industry, not only just being in life are you getting it, but now, several people in their industry are getting it. So as a result of her industry, she was even more a walking antenna. So no, as those amounts came down, then her sensitivity also came down. So there was a direct correlation. And so even when she came in for her first session, she came in and she was like, I jokingly say 100%, 110% on her cane, like she was just having to use a cane. I literally had to shut down all of the equipment in my office just to have her go through and come to have a session with the platinum energy detox system. And so what happened was she had the session, and it was just so amazing. I had to run out to the car after her because she had forgotten her cane.
I love it. I love it. Very cool. But now, to this day, is she able to be, because she's detoxified the heavy metals, so she's less of an antenna, is she able to be
Yes.
around computers and things like that without getting weak in the legs?
Yeah, and we've had many people who are literally housebound. They couldn't go out in society because either they were so chemically sensitive or they were so EMF sensitive. We had one woman who couldn't go to her children's basketball games because she was so chemically sensitive. She couldn't stand what people were wearing as personal care products, nor how they were cleaning the gym. And through using our system, she was able to go to the children's basketball games, and in the latter stages she actually even had a house renovation, which was just so amazing.
That's awesome because those who are chemically sensitive just could not possibly go through a renovation with all the new off-gassing.
Exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
so what happens is that when the body's burden, and that's what they call toxicity, body burden, when the body burden goes up, so do the volume of symptoms in the body. So the more severe the symptoms, the more that is a window into understanding that you've got a large load of toxicity. So we actually wrote an article about this in showing the correlation between the severity of symptoms and the severity of toxicity. But then we also correlated it to the 4 stages of degenerative diseases, showing how that when the body's burden got to a certain point, which, you know, the term tipping point has become well known now, when it got to the point where it can no longer tolerate it, then that's when the severity of symptoms went into a major degenerative disease. Now, what happened when we started this company back in 2004, we would have people phone us who were in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, and onwards that had the degenerative diseases. Now, this is 2004. Now, I have to tell you, nowadays, we have people phoning us who are 20, 30, and 40 with those degenerative diseases. I had a woman come to us who, at the age of 3, had rheumatoid arthritis. How does a 3-year-old have a senior citizen's disease? Her mother lived 3 blocks from the pulp mill when she was carrying her.
Mm.
Yeah, when she was pregnant. And so, it's the absorption of this toxicity, and even, nowadays, I hear about teenagers having, heart attacks. And so it's the accumulation factor that is causing the tipping point, and then they're going into these degenerative diseases. And when the toxicity reaches a certain level in the body, what occurs is the autoimmune diseases. So the autoimmune diseases is when, say, for example, heavy metals get into the body, it attaches onto the proteins. And so the body knows there's a foreign particle, there's an intruder in the system, and it shouldn't be there. So the body goes and missile seeks out where the intruder is, but because it's now attached to healthy tissue in the body, it starts to attack the body's healthy tissue, and that's the beginning of an autoimmune disease. Now, as you know from all of your exposure to all the people that you've spoken to, who are, experts in the field of wellness and integrative medicine, what is occurring is, that the amount of people that are experiencing this kind of effect nowadays is just so astronomical because of the exposure that we're all experiencing. And I mean, like Flint in the United States was just a horror example of what can go wrong when lead toxicity gets into the main water system of a city. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but what's so brilliant, to emphasize here is that all somebody has to be aware is, where they're getting, their exposure from. And the number one thing that they just have to do is tune into how they're feeling. If they're dragging anchor and they're feeling absolutely awful, their energy level is their first cue. How's your energy level today? Did you wake up at 5 a.m. and you wanted to get up? Not most people do not affirm that answer. They do not say yes. They hit the snooze button as many times as possible. So anyways, so your body is your mirror, and it's your best friend, and it's sending alert signals to you on whether it's happy or not. And the key thing is you got to listen to those alert signals, but your body sends amazing signals to you to let you know when you're in a toxic environment. The classic examples are the sneezing, wheezing, cold, kind of fluish kind of symptoms when you're expressing a lot of mucus and you've got runny eyes and runny nose. Well, your body is literally in an export mode. It's trying to release the toxicity that it's just absorbed. And if you get an extreme headache all of a sudden, or your respiratory system goes into distress where you're not breathing very well, your body is cueing you, get out of that environment. It's very, very toxic in here. And so we just have to listen to those signals and heed the body's, messages.
Exactly. Listen to the symptoms of the body. That's the language of your health, the language your body is trying to tell you. And also, don't just dismiss symptoms because you've always had them or your doctor said they're genetic, or you think that's just normal. Like, oh, well, isn't everyone tired in the morning? Or isn't, doesn't everyone have constipation or whatever it is, right? These little things that are huge signs of something deeper going on, that we sometimes just negate because we think that's just how it's supposed to be.
Exactly. And it's not the only reason that that whole genetic component comes up is that what occurs is where the weakest link is in your body is where the symptoms will show up first. But I guarantee you, if the bottom right corner of the aquarium, as an analogy of the human body, if the bottom right corner of the aquarium, like the colon, is having distress signals, I can guarantee you it's in every part of the aquarium. It's in every cell of the aquarium. It's going to show up in the genetic weakest link first.
Exactly. Like if your whole family has asthma and your whole family is EFA deficient, it's not that it's genetic, it's that that's the weakest link, and you fill your nutrient tanks and help get rid of the toxins, and all of a sudden all those symptoms go away. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to have arthritis because your grandma did, or you're supposed to have diabetes because your mom did, or you're supposed to have asthma because everyone in your family does. It just means that's where the symptoms show up, to let you know. So one person might get migraines, the other person might have weak legs and fall over, but they both have heavy metal toxicity.
And here's the correlation back that you'll love is that what occurs, remember we talked about the mucky aquarium opposed to the clean one. Well, the commonality of all sickness is acidity. When the body gets, the more acidic the body becomes, the more severe the symptom is. And so we know that cancer exists only in a very acid environment. But that same environment is what's causing ulcers, it's causing arthritis, it's causing rheumatism, it's causing gout. And so that hyperacidity within the body is what is undermining it. And so one of the things that we found with this, with the PES, the Platinum Energy Systems Detox Foot Spa, is that we have found it is the fastest way to balance out the pH, because the body's own innate understanding of where the balance should be and experiencing what it is, it works, as we know from the word homeostasis, meaning to balance out. It tries to balance out, adapt to releasing that. But when the log jam, beaver dam, the drainage systems of the body are not occurring, the lymphatic system is log jammed, the circulatory system isn't moving, then of course, the immune system can't get to any part of the body to fix and repair and heal. And with that hyperacidity, then you become a absolute perfect habitat for viruses, bacteria, fungus, and autoimmune diseases and cancer. And so the number one thing that everybody needs to do is to get their pH to the correct place. Now your blood needs to be at 7.35 to 4.5, or else you're in a coma. So of course the body will sacrifice all functionality to keep you conscious, because the number one thing it knows is that you have to stay in a conscious state to operate. And so the number one thing that we see with people when they release the heavy metals, especially, is that it starts to balance out the pH in the body because the heavy metals themselves are causing hyperacidity.
And in order for the body to maintain homeostasis in terms of acidity, it uses calcium and other minerals. So it'll actually, if we're in an acidic state because of heavy metals and toxins, and maybe lack of some nutrition, our body will tell the bones to release their minerals. So now we're stealing from our mineral banks basically to bring those metals, sorry, those minerals like calcium and magnesium, those minerals that our body uses as part of the buffer system to bring down the acidity. But long term, I mean, listen, you can take a tooth. If you have a kid that has a tooth that's fallen out, take that tooth, put it in a can of Coke. The next day, it'll be rubbery. It'll be, you could practically tie in a knot. It's going to be a rubber band. It's not going to be a tooth anymore. And it's only a few hours in some, acid that people drink on a regular basis, and thinking that's normal. Drinking a Coke or a Diet Coke is enough to chew away at that the minerals in that tooth. But what happens in our bodies, our body uses up our minerals to try to bring down the acidity and bring it to that healthy level that you mentioned, that very strict level in order to stay conscious. And if we're in that state too long, that's like you said, degenerative disease being arthritis, osteopenia, osteoporosis, because the body was spending all that time um, taking out of the mineral banks of our bones just to stay conscious, just to keep the acidity balanced.
Exactly. What did you know that the pH of Coca-Cola is a 2?
Ugh.
And the blood is 7.35 to 7.45. So that's how extreme it is.
Right, and people drink it and they, for fun.
And then they wonder why they feel the way they do. And that is the
Right.
classic example of dragging anchor and having no energy, no stamina, and foggy brain, and just not feeling good.
So I mean, it sounds like so many symptoms could be as a result of heavy metal toxicity. How would someone know that they have heavy metal toxicity, or that they have, or should this just be like a good thing? Like we should all preventively do things to eliminate it because everyone's exposed to a certain amount of them, or should everyone go get tested, or should everyone just listen to the symptoms of their body and then wait till they have some symptoms before they take action to detoxify heavy metals?
Well, absolutely, I can guarantee you that everybody on the planet now has heavy metal toxicity. Recently with all of our fires, you've had them over there and all up the West Coast and even on Vancouver Island here to the north, we had, this smoke and I mean, I heard of it going all the way over to Norway. But anyways, when I was working with some clients here, I noticed that their eyes were gray. The whites of their eyes were no longer white, they were gray. And that is a
Jeez.
classic symptom of heavy metal toxicity. So that when we worked with detoxifying their bodies, their eyes went white.
Wow. I had an interesting experience last year. So I'm in near Seattle, and last year I was ignorant about how bad it was to breathe in the smoke. I just thought, I've been around campfires. It's not a big deal. And so we had our windows open, we played outside during the big, there's some really big fires that were going on last year in Oregon and California and in BC. And so we were getting inundated. I mean, you couldn't see across the street. It was just so thick. But we breathed it in, and I noticed my lungs hurt. I had a sore throat. And then a month later, I developed pneumonia, and my husband developed pneumonia, and my son had months of respiratory irritation.
Mm.
And talking to Dr. Klinghardt, he said, "Well, of course you did have pneumonia." And I talked to a few other naturopaths that all had a huge increase um, in lung issues. And Dr. Clara said, of course you did. You were doing damage to your lungs by breathing that in, but also, I believe he even said this, either he said it on air or off air, but we had a discussion about this, and he said the pine trees, for example, spend what, 50, 100 years breathing in all of the pollution and storing the pollution in the tree. The tree whole is like a big, sponge to help bring in and filter the air. And then you're burning all of them and breathing in the ash. The ash is not just benign, it's filled with pollution, concentrated pollution and heavy metals. And
Right.
so this year, I saved up money and bought an Austin air filter. I had it in our bedroom when the fires happened, which they were very bad this year. We stayed indoors. We had kept the air filter with us, and we just hung out with the air filter. And we feel amazing. It was night and day difference. I get better. I even got better sleep. We started to all get better sleep. Um, my son used to bring home all kinds of colds that we started to, we'd always catch them. I noticed that after doing this, we stopped, catching all the colds. He stopped catching the colds. I was like, I'm doing everything I learned from all the guests, so I can't say it's just having an air filter, but being conscious of not throwing gasoline on the fire.
Exactly. The input
Right.
and the output. As a nurse, I was trained, to monitor input and output. So, if you guard against your exposure, your overexposure to toxicity, and then do the lifestyle that helps your body to release the toxicity that is absorbing, that you can't help because you're just in the world, then that's the perfect remedy, is minimize the danger and maximize the output.
Right, exactly. Tell me about the other two people. So you talked about the artist and you talked about the man who couldn't smell and then afterwards could after doing these sessions. Tell me about the other two people in your study.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the women was really interesting. Her sister actually brought her to us because she was 88 years old and had extreme arthritis and was in a very debilitated pain state and completely was liberated from that. And she said, I've got to bring my sister who was in a nursing home, and one of the nightmare stories. Anyway, so this woman came, and when she showed up, she didn't know where she was,
Hmm.
and I don't think she even knew who she was. So, anyways, in the process of her having a session, she released into the basin what looked like an inch or two of goop. I mean, literally, it looked like when you make chicken soup and you stick it in the fridge overnight, and that layer of fat
Mm-hmm.
that's on the surface. That's what her water looked like after one session. And in the process of her releasing that, I mean, that is a classic example of a clogged lymph system. So this woman, she had been a nurse in the wartime and did all the X-rays, but did that she didn't have an apron at the time, and so that exposure was one part of her story. But even as a child, as, as young, as 3 years old, she said that she would turn beet red and never sweat. So probably most of her entire life, she had not the capability of sweating. So that indicates a clogged a clogged lymph system. So now, in the process of having the session, this completely released, and her mental cognitivity came back. She spoke many different languages. She was well traveled, well read, and all of that articulation came back.
Oh, that is so exciting. That is so exciting.
Well, I mean, it was such an amazing journey of us doing, the original investigation because, I had the concept of, yeah, toxicology. I had the slight understanding in my own body, if you get these pollutants in, the body's going to react. But I have to tell you, the journey of discovery was astounding to see when people released this internal pollution and got it out. So our slogan was better on the outside. So when they got it out of the body, it was just so extraordinary to see how they were completely liberated by their symptoms. So now I've begun to understand that when you're symptom free, I mean truly symptom free, is when you have a clean aquarium, being the body. And now those fish, which are the cells, are just so happy in that environment. And to have a methodology that enables the body to, in its innate ability to have a methodology now to open it up, to help it to release, to do it in a gentle, safe fashion, and a pleasant method, non-intrusive, non-painful, all gain, all pain. I mean, I'll tell you, I just dance for joy every day when people phone me up and tell me, their experiences of their transformations.
So you had the water tested, the weird sludge, right? That
Yes,
came out of her.
yes.
What was in it?
Well, she also had a lot of heavy metals, but what had occurred in her specific situation, I mean, she's in a nursing home, so you can well imagine what she's fed. But also, she's on a lot of pharmaceuticals at the time. I mean, they even had her on warfarin, which is, the blood coagulant drug. And I mean, that drug is supposed to be monitored for appropriateness, because if the blood gets too thin, then they can actually start to bleed. And if it's too thick, then, it's like a heart attack. And they weren't even monitoring her. So she was a complicated kind of case where she had, lots of interference going on. But I mean, a body that just clearly wasn't releasing. The fat content was just like the lard and the trans fats and everything that she had had in her life. And she was you know not a slim toothpick of a body type. She was the opposite. And so she was carrying a lot of excess weight, so she had a lot of toxicity. But when you looked at her eyes were just like cesspools. And even her sister had said that. And what was interesting in her state of dementia, and you often see this with people who are going into that state, is that when the liver isn't happy, the liver, different organs will portray different emotions. And so, for example, the liver is, when people are really clogged up in their liver, they get very cranky and ornery and, belligerent. And her sister admitted that, that her nature had gone that way. But as she detoxed, the sister, who was the 88-year-old, told me that that part of her was no longer there. It completely left and evaporated
Oh, that's so beautiful.
as the liver got happier and happier. And of course, the Chinese have a saying, that you are as happy as your liver. So I tell everybody, make your liver really happy.
That's beautiful. And tell me about the last person that you guys tested the water with.
That person was experiencing a lot of neuropathy, which is, the numbness occurs in the feet so that they can't feel their feet. We've had many different people with this issue. At first, it sort of is just a continuous tingly sensation. And then when the nerves have been driven crazy to that point, then they start numbing out, and then people actually can't even feel their feet. So we had one young man who was a fork lift operator. And I thought, they use the controls with their hands, but in actual fact, it's their feet. Well, he couldn't work anymore because he couldn't feel his feet. So through a series of sessions, he was able to now go back to work because he got the entire feeling back in his feet, except for one part in his the ball of his foot of his left foot. So we're just continuing doing sessions on him to liberate it. But what happens is that gravity takes everything down to the feet, and so what happens is these heavy metals get in the body and they go down in with the circulation down to the feet, and they get stuck there and they can't come back up. And so then the nerves are driven crazy. Now, if you realize that heavy metals are releasing acidity into the body, just imagine if you got acid on your skin, how that would feel. And now here's this poor little nerve cell, and you put acid on it, and I mean, it just, completely, berserks out and has no defense mechanism that it can counteract that. And so then it just starts to, drive the nerves crazy.
And so many people are on pain medication because they don't know what to do, or it drives me crazy when people have restless leg syndrome and they get on a medication for that. Now it drives me crazy because I know that's over toxicity and a mineral deficiency.
Exactly. And a lot of times it's the arterial system clogging up with this pollution. And of course, the irritation, that restlessness feeling is because the body knows it's not being able to circulate the blood the way it was designed to do, and that, the hindrance is causing the irritation.
Mm. So when you did these tests with these people, you were looking, what were you looking to accomplish? Because I know it's expensive to have that water tested, so you couldn't like take 1,000 people. Like, sometimes people say, well, that's just 4 people is just not enough. But what were you looking to accomplish, by choosing 4 people to do these tests with?
Yeah, well, it's just the scientific side of me wanting to validate the process, because if it was only the equipment causing the effect, then all 5 samples, the control, no feet in the water, plus the 4 patients, would have had the identical chemistry in the water. But in each instant, comparing the control, no feet in the foot spa, to the 4 different patients, the content difference showed up in every single case was different. The profile of the water was entirely different for each sample.
And did you see over time that the water became less and less toxic as they kept using it?
Well, mostly, but now we've got that bad part of the story in here, is that as the intensity of the pollution increases in the world and people's exposure to it, even, they talk about the polar bears, now, but what is occurring is it depends upon how much toxicity the person has accumulated, but also what their daily environment is. And we're finding that indoor pollution can be equally as toxic to outdoor pollution. And that's why it is just so important. I mean, you only get one body in this lifetime. It just so amazes me how much people spend on their car in terms of maintenance, and they're not maintaining their body. So we've got to do everything you can to assist the body to release this content. And as I say, it's foreign to the body, so it can't neutralize it, it can't alter it, it can't change the chemistry, it can't do any of those things that it would do with natural products in the body. And so its only other choice is to storage closet it. But as the storage closets get fuller and fuller, and that's why you see, especially with allergies, when the liver closet's full, then the body just goes into a hyperreactivity. And that hyperreactivity, or the severity of your symptoms, is telling you the level of toxicity in your body is beyond your body's capability.
Mm. I have been really looking forward to this next part, which is you explaining how this thing works. When I heard Dr. Klinghardt rave about it, long before before I even knew you, and then when we met, I thought, man, this is so cool. It's so the universe aligning to help me bring me the information I'm looking for myself and also for all the listeners. So how does this thing work? Because I know there's a lot of I've seen the knockoffs that are on eBay and Amazon. I stay far away because I've looked into it and I see that they're just that they're knockoffs. But the problem is that the knockoffs out there give your system, the true system, the one that actually works, gives this a bad name because there's a bunch of knockoffs, just like in the similar. to the sauna industry, there's a really amazing sauna that actually works, and then there's a bunch of toxic knockoffs, right? But with your system, there's a science to it. I mean, Dr. Klinghardt said that it increases, not only does the toxins come out of the feet during the session, but that the kidneys for 3 days afterwards release more heavy metals. So that it helps to stimulate the body to work better. I'd love for you to get into the history of this, like who designed this? How did they figure it out? How did they figure this technology out? How does it work? And why is your system different from the knockoffs out there?
Yeah, let's start with the last question first. So, what is occurring, as you've pointed out, is when something works in the world, then you have a lot of people make imitation or knockoff models, and so those systems I jokingly call the wannabes, and so they have no sophistication in whatsoever. They are just metal rings or rods or plates or whatever in the water, and the majority of them have copper or zinc. Now, when you put copper or zinc with a saline solution, a salt solution, it will create huge coloration in the water. And now these knockoff companies, having slick willy marketers, they realized that it was going to create, this coloration in the water. So they create a story around the coloration. And here's the story: that the color of the water is indicating what organ is purging. If anybody tells you that story, literally just walk away, because that is so bogus. The body, in its brilliance, does not purge one organ at a time. Whatever comes out your colon or your bladder, in the feces, in the urine, is a collection of debris that has been collected from all parts of the body. So when you are releasing from those two organs, you are releasing a stream of content that has come from everywhere in the body. So to say that the green is the gallbladder purging is so stick your finger down your throat, not true. And I mean, when people would come and tell me that story, I was just like, I'd roll my eyes. But the gift that I had was a science background and a strong understanding of physiology, anatomy, and biochemistry. So I knew that wasn't valid. So of course, that immediately caused my hackles to rise. And so like, that's why there's such a controversy in the field about detox foot spas, because of the reputation that these knockoffs have created. And so there's so many bogus things that they're saying as to how they work and what they do, and all of that, and so it's misled the public. But ultimately, the real true story is, when you have a session, how do you feel? Like, when you release from your bladder and your colon, your body feels different afterwards, because it's actually released some toxic content that it no longer wanted. And
Yeah.
so when you have a session in these knockoff foot spas, we actually had a woman who came to us who was a nurse, and she was also a reflexologist. She was a massage therapist, a aromatherapist. So she did multiple different kinds of therapies. And she was exposed to one of these knockoff foot spas in which they put a tablespoon of salt into the water. And then they added more, and her feet were going zzz, and her legs were going zzz. And so, she said to the woman, "Are you sure this is right? Are you sure this is how I'm supposed to be feeling?" "Oh, yeah, no, but everybody feels that way." Just completely dismissed her. And so her body was telling her, get out of this, because this is not right. But she allowed someone who was a complete stranger to override her body's intelligence. Now, that's really silly. If we would just listen to our body in the first place, our body is telling us it's in a not good environment. Get out. So the moral of the story is, listen to your body. But behind that, in terms of technology, these knockoff foot spas have no control over the electricity. When they put more salt into the water, they're literally increasing the conductivity of that water so that it's holding more and more electricity. The human body was not designed to be exposed to high levels of electricity, and hence why we're EMF sensitive in the first place. So that is the problem with these knockoff foot spas, is they have what I call junior technology, no ability. There's actually one with a wristband, and the wristband, they call it completing the circuit. Well, what that means is that it doesn't have a grounding wire. So where do they put it on the human?
Oh,
They put it on the wrist. So I was telling a man that was phoning up and telling me he was exposed to, he was actually having sessions in one of those systems. I said, my God, stop immediately. And so then I said, would you send your wife up on the roof and hold on to the lightning pole in the middle of an electrical storm? And this man was a little tongue in cheek. He came back to me and he said, depends on who my wife is. So he was very cheeky. So anyways, I mean, it just floors me that these systems are on the market with no ability to control the electricity. So to answer your question, ours is the only system, and why you got focused on the word array. Ours is the only system, the component that sits in the water that has the array, that actually has the control mechanisms designed right into the array. So when you put your feet in the water and you have a bad practitioner putting in too much salt and causing the water to be too conductive, or you are purging sodium as an excess because you've been eating canned soups, especially. Just look on the back label of a can and find out how much salt they put in it. Anyways, so excess anything in the body becomes a toxin. So now you're purging the toxin into the water, which is the salt, and you're jacking up the level of electricity. Ours is the only system in the world that has the capability of controlling the electricity, because it monitors, regulates, and controls the electricity right in the water. The only way you can tell what the sodium level is if you have the monitor right in the water, because the unknown variable is what is the client purging? Is the client purging salt? And so that is how we differ from any other system in the world, is that the array itself is 100% automated. So there's no dials, there's no diddle, there's no fiddle, there's no having to alter anything, there's no dials to watch to make sure. When I originally had a session in someone else's system that was a knockoff, the woman had to change the water 4 times. And I said, why do you have to do that? And she said, well, because the electricity is going up into the danger zone and it could wreck my machine. Well, it was on the 4th session I finally had the wisdom to ask that. And so my feet were instantly out of that water, and I mean, I left the place because I realized that that system had no ability to monitor, regulate, and control the electricity. We also have a hospital power source, medical power source, that's controlling electricity. So it's the same power source that you'd have if you were in ICU or the emergency room. That's the precision level of the monitoring. So if there's any weirdness with the electricity, like a blackout, a lightning strike, a surge, whatever, it will just shut down the system immediately. And our system is 100% automated, as I mentioned. And so that's what makes it so unique, is because you don't have to do anything but turn on an on switch. The technology is designed to do the rest. And there's multiple technologies designed in it so that you're getting multiple therapies.
let's go into that. I want to go into the multiple therapies, but how does it work? Like how does it work to stimulate both the kidneys to remove more heavy metals and to actually get heavy metals out of the feet during the session?
Well, now we have the body's intelligence. So what occurs with ours is, with these multiple technologies, is that it's lining up behind the body's intelligence. Because when we were doing our due diligence and seeing all these different, recoveries people were having in different parts of the body, I was like, how can the machine know somebody has a sinus problem or someone has a digestive problem or a gout problem or whatever? And so then, of course, I realized, ding, it's the body that's doing it. So we're just helping the body to open up its drainage route. So literally, the whole concept is the log jam beaver dam. So that going back to, the lava tubes, so the lymphatic system is the body's designated system for exodus. But what happens is this debris gets stuck in it. Now the debris may be heavy metals. It may be other kinds of internal pollution. It may be microbes that are actually growing in those areas. One of the people we worked with had ulcerative colitis, and she lived in a town where there was a nickel mine. And what was occurring was that when the body's lymphatic system is working, it has what's called nodes. So if you think of the node as like a coffee filter, so what was getting stuck in the coffee filter was all the heavy metals. Well, of course, that was creating a hyperacidic condition, and there's huge amounts of lymph nodes in your digestive tract. And so she was just hyperacidic. So then that turned out to be a fabulous habitat for H. pylori, which is the bad bacteria that causes ulcers. So she had just created a perfect environment for this microbe to take over. But she went to a naturopath and was diagnosed with heavy metal toxicity. And this naturopath happened to have our system. So she did the lab results of seeing what her levels were, and then used our system, and she could see how the lab results were decreasing as she had more sessions. And in the end, her ulcerative colitis completely disappeared. And she never had a problem with it again, because she got rid of the heavy metals that was the core of the condition behind the illness. And that's what you see in all these different illnesses, is that there is some kind of toxicity that's driving that part of the body into a disease and illness state. So what this technology does is it opens up the drainage routes. Like when you had Anne Louise Gittleman on, she really pinpointed in your podcast how, it's the gallbladder, liver is such a huge component. When those get clogged up, then it's like it debilitates the entire body. But it's the drainage systems of the body clogging up that is the core of the illness. But behind the illness is, why are they clogging up? So this technology helps to open up the lymphatic system. And the lymph system is the one part of the body that goes to every cell of the body. So it doesn't matter whether it's your toe or your brain. So when people have neuropathy or gout in the feet, it's because that's the area that's clogged up. When they're having dementia, it's because the brain is clogged up. When they're having a heart attack, it's because the heart is clogged up. When they have liver or gallbladder disease, it's because that's clogged up. So the liberating aspect to this technology is that it gets the lymphatic system opened up. Now, when you put your feet into warm salt water, you open up the door of exit, which is called the eccrine sweat glands, and you can use the hands as well. And so that opens up the door for the lymph system to export out the toxic content. And you see, the wisdom of the body is just so brilliant. Your body has thousands and thousands of years of understanding on how to heal itself, but it can't do so if it's in a slimy, mucky, yucky aquarium. It's just all clogged up and nothing's moving. So now you get the environment internally clean, and you get the lymph system moving. So now the body's wisdom is to dump out of the cells into the lymph system. It's like a moving conveyor belt to just continue to move that content out the body. And so now when we open up the eccrine sweat glands in the feet and use that as the door of exit for the lymphatic system, we now understand that, that is the liberation in the moment of why the toxicity is coming out in the basin during the session. But when you stop the session, it does continue on, but it's just now going to come out your normal exit routes. It will go out through the liver, it will go out through the urine and the feces and the gallbladder. All of those will be an export or a drainage system for toxicity to come out of the body.
So it stimulates the emunctory systems of the body to kick on and release, and so it's really helping to get it all out during the foot bath and after.
And then to answer your question on what happens is we have two electrodes, two metal rings in the water. One's an anode, one's a cathode, one's a negative, one's a positive polarity. Now, when you open up the sweat glands, the sweat is toxicity, and that toxicity has particles, and the particles have a positive or negative. So what happens is we create a higher osmotic pressure in the water, so it literally pulls the content across the skin barrier because the osmotic pressure is higher in the water. And so it literally, like a magnet, the coils in that moment work like a magnet to draw the particles physically out of the body.
Now, what does it feel like? We're obviously not getting electrocuted the whole time.
No, now see, that was one of the things with the nursing background that I had to have 100% assurance that I felt comfortable putting my own body in there, my family, my clients, that there was no way that anybody ever could get hurt. And that's why the platinum energy system is so unique in the world market, because it's the only one that has almost no electricity. It's so low level electricity that nobody could ever get hurt because of the way the technology has decreased the electricity. So the amount of electricity going into the water, if you were to put your finger live on the wire, which you never would, of course, but if you did, the amount of shock that you would get would just be equal to two little kids rubbing their feet on the carpet. So nobody could ever get hurt in the system. And that's why I felt so confident. Now, what makes it also unique is that every single session in our system is the same potency. The other models on the market, they start with weak electrodes, and every single session they get weaker and weaker. Now, the electrodes are actually eroding as part of the treatment process because that's just how electrolysis works. And so each session in the other systems is weaker and weaker, but we've been able to standardize the treatment so that every session is identical in terms of potency, and every session for the entire 30 minutes is held at the ideal treatment level. So what occurs is that the technology is liberating the content, but it's the body that's doing the liberation. We're just creating the mechanisms so that we assist the body to be more efficient. And what happens is that the molecule size, when things get too big, is that causes logjam, beaver dam. And so the technologies just help to break up the particles into their minute size, and now they can be released into the water.
How does it work that it stimulates the kidneys and all the emunctory systems? What is it? So I understand what you're saying about it, about the really cool process of it becoming a magnet, opening up the sweat glands and pulling out the magnetically pulling out the toxins. That makes sense to me, under the high osmotic pressure that it's creating. But I still don't understand, how does it stimulate the kidneys and the liver to keep detoxifying for days after? Because Dr. Klinghardt said, and you might be able to quote some studies here, but he said that you could test urine 3 days later and it's still in an increase in heavy metals coming out of the body after doing this treatment.
You're not going to love my answer because now you've moved into the proprietary technology zone and I can't reveal that. So, because, if we were to reveal that answer, then, we'd have more other imitation models trying to create our perfection.
I can respect that, but it works. It works. You talk about what Dr. Klinger says about? I mean, have there been, you know, clinical evidence to show
Yes.
that you can actually see, like, we took 50 people and they all did this thing and then peed in a cup 3 days later and we saw an increase in release of heavy metals. Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah, we haven't done a study as such. What we've done is we monitored clients over, since 2004. Now, a lot of these clients are being sent to us from medical clinics. And these patients are coming to us in such a debilitated state. Many of them have seen 20 or 30 doctors ahead of the clinic that sends them to us. And they're all in a state that they're so debilitated that they cannot detox naturally, but also they're so debilitated they can't handle any form of detox. They go into absolute overwhelm. So we had a couple of patients go to one of these clinics that we work with. Now, this clinic picked these two males as an example because neither male had ever had any intervention, never been to a doctor, never been to a naturopath, no kind of practitioner, no kind of intervention ever in their lives. So this was a pure case study. And so what they did was they did the urine challenge test on them initially because they suspected by their symptoms and what they were experiencing, and because they knew their industry, which was construction. Especially, one of them was also a fisherman. But anyways, so they knew by their symptoms that they probably had metal toxicity. So they did a urine challenge test, and the first male came in with lead at 23 and mercury at um, sorry, lead at 23 and mercury at 12. So what they did was they used no other intervention. They only used our PS detox system so that they could see what kind of results they would get just with that. And as I say, it was unusual because no other intervention had ever been done on these two males. So what occurred was the first male had 6 sessions and then they retested him. But the second male came in because he had been involved in several different industries where he was exposed to lead. And so he had lead at 79. And so they did 10 sessions on him. And so in 6 sessions, the first male, they had a 50% reduction. And in 10 sessions, the second male had a 50% reduction with no other intervention, only using PES detox.
Outstanding. That's really exciting.
It was because, I mean, the trouble with trying to do a real pure case study is that so few examples in the world where somebody's never been to anybody.
Right.
Or, and most of these clinics, they're doing multiple therapies. So we have seen over the years many, many cases of, amazing results coming in the lab results. But what's been really interesting is that we've worked with detox experts in the world who've done 20, 30, 40 years of different kinds of interventions and had results with our system nothing else gave them. But as in this case of the case studies, we've had people use no other intervention and seen the results that they had with just only using the PES system.
You had mentioned that there were multiple technologies happening at the same time. Are you able to discuss or tell me which ones you can discuss?
Well, the ones that I already have
Okay,
actually.
great. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking there's like a Rife machine in there. Like I'm like my mind is going crazy. Like I know, and I respect your proprietary, but I'm thinking like, man, what's in there? Like,
I know in actual fact it's the combination of several brilliant inventors. So it's not just one source. It's a combination of things, but it's just creating an environment internally that optimizes the body's ability to release the toxicity. To give you an example, we had a dentist. Now, of course, this is such a perfect, example. We had a dentist come to us who his doctor sent him to us because, of course, his astronomical levels of mercury, having worked with mercury for 40 years.
Mm.
He put mercury fillings into people's mouths for 40 years. Well, he talked about his blood levels being very high, and so anyways, so what occurred was in the process of discovery, he talked about having a cyst on his shoulder. Well, when someone says cyst to me, I think of something, small, like a mole, or maybe a little bigger. Well, it turned out that this mass that he obviously wasn't fully facing was the size of a grapefruit on his shoulder.
Oh my gosh.
But look at the wisdom of the body. I mean, this is what's so brilliant about the human body. I mean, only God could have designed it. So the body knew how toxic that content was, and it put it on the outside of his body in a water balloon.
Right, because cysts have like a skin. They have their own, the body develops a membrane to hold the cyst in place.
And so that's what is often occurring in the body, where people have these sacs. They're sacs of toxicity. The body has corralled and closeted the toxicity into a sac. And now people go in and open them up and liberate that content. But anyways, his luckily was on the outside of his shoulder. His only saving grace was that they didn't want to do the operation because he'd end up with a hole in his shoulder. So he was referred to us, and over the process of using our system, that did shrink to the size of a pimple. And he was using no other methodology.
How did his doctor know to send him to you?
Because it was a holistic doctor.
Oh.
It was actually an osteopath. So full on, bone doctor, but a medical bone doctor as opposed to a chiropractor, which is also, a full on medical person, which, it's just such a crime that chiropractors have been belittled since the 20s in the, as you've seen in, documentaries such as The Truth of Cancer, where they tried to purify the world of holistic orientation.
Right, right. And that whole history of the Flexner Report 150 years ago, and Carnegie putting his money towards almost like a mob to snuff out holistic medicine. Well, you know what? We're not having any of that. It sticks around in the world because it survived in the world because it works, and because there's people like you with the big hearts that are going to keep following your passion to help people no matter what. So how you've got people clinics around the world that are customers of yours, because I know you have a system that they can buy for their clinic. I want to talk about what's the difference between the sort of the clinic foot system and the at home one. And maybe I know that I do have a lot of great practitioners that listen to the show, so I'd like to speak to them for a minute and just explain what does it look like to work in a clinic? What kind of results do clinics get? You've had practitioners around the world work with you for years with this device, so I'd love to hear what that looks like.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we have practitioners who do often multiple therapies, and so one of the clinics that we were working with was a woman who did 5 different things, and so clients would come to her for one of those 5 different things, but they would only do that one therapy. So anyways, it was another client of ours that referred her to us because she had actually experienced one of the knockoff foot spas and was not impressed. So this client said, well, you should check out theirs because theirs really works. So she came to us, and she started to use it herself. Now she was in her 60s, and she was starting to experience hip problems, and she just loved to go hiking. She lived in Vancouver, and she loved to go hiking, and she couldn't do it anymore because her hip was just causing her such distress. So anyway, so she purchased it initially just to get her own body in order, which is often the way. And so, anyways, she had such liberation on this hip issue that she was quite a talker anyway, so she couldn't shut up about it. So she was telling everybody about it. So all these clients that were coming here for one therapy now said, well, I'd like to try that. So they dovetailed whatever their normal therapy was with that, and it totally, completely exonerated whatever that first therapy was, because once the body is open and releasing and circulating and liberating and happily habitating, those wonderful fish in that beautiful aquarium, whatever therapy is being adjoined to it is going to have heightened results. Because as you know, when the cells, for example, are clogged up, the pollution sticks to the outside of the cell because there's a lipid or fat layer, and it also sticks to the inside of the cell. So now you got this goop on the outside and you got the goop on the inside. Well, that's totally inhibiting the import and the export out of the cell. So now your nutrients aren't getting in and your
Right.
toxicity is not getting out. So we've had multiple people tell us how they didn't have to take as much supplements and they were feeling, one of the biggest thing people feel is, they sleep so much better, but the energy, your energy level tells, the level of your health. If you have extraordinary levels of energy, is because, you're more toxic free. But if you have zero energy, that's telling you something too. So anyways, in the process of using the other therapy, this with other therapies, it's just amazing. So this woman literally doubled her business overnight, because once the clients experienced the more exonerated effects of the first therapy they were doing along with the PES system, their results were so sufficiently increased that they started referring all of their family and friends, which they had never done when they only came to her for the one therapy.
I love it. I love it. So, I mean, I can imagine acupuncturists, naturopaths, chiropractors, um, aromatherapists, Ayurvedic practitioners, even massage therapists, even estheticians that are more holistic minded. Because, you could throw someone's feet in there while you're working on their hands. Like,
Exactly. And dentists, we have a lot. We have a
really?
lot of dentists starting to use it for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but also referring to their patients. We have a holistic, was one of the original pioneers in the field. She would do the mercury amalgam removal. So, of course, her exposure was high, but guess where she was doing it? She was doing it in her house. And as a result, to this day, neither of her daughters has been able to get pregnant. Her husband ended up in a, a huge disability situation and ended up having to go into a home because of his exposure, because of course it went up into the air system in the house and just completely infiltrated everything in the house. And the dentist herself was hugely sick for years, so she was a huge advocate of teaching people what was happening with mercury. And so now she has continued her holistic practice, and she actually does live blood cell analysis, which is one of the other initial testing that we did with live blood cell analysis. And so what occurred was that she would test the patients before they had the session and then put them back under the microscope after having a PES detox, and she was able to show them the difference in their blood. And that's what we did initially. Was we took someone who was having the flu at the time, because we knew that they'd have horrible looking blood. So we took them, and this person had never had a session before. So we put them under the microscope before their first session, and then we did the session and put them under the microscope afterwards. So of course, I don't know if you ever seen live blood cell analysis, but in the first example, the person had a pH of 6, which is very acidic. And we said before the goal is to be 7 or above, because then you're starting into alkalinity. 7.35 to 7.45 is ideal. But anyways, this person was at 6, so their blood was completely coagulated. The sinuses were completely congested. So was the chest. The eyes looked like cesspools. The face was white, no energy, just feeling absolutely horrid in the middle of having the flu. And so we put them under the microscope after their session, and they released a ton of heavy metal. And what happened was, when you put them back under the microscope, the blood completely opened up and was liberating and moving. So there's the example of what we were talking about, the aquarium, the mucky, slimy, yucky aquarium, perfect habitat for the virus. Now you change the pH, and the blood will start to open up and move and liberate, and now you get the oxygen state up in the body, because you drop the acidity. Up comes the oxygen state. And so you could see how it started to completely open up right after the session. So we did a series of sessions with this person and brought him back. And now the blood was perfect, like little lifesavers, complete circles on their own, completely liberated, flowing. And the pH was now at 7.5.
Wow. And were they able to recover better from the flu?
Well, they recovered within that week from the flu. And when we did the dry blood cell analysis, you could see in the red blood cell all this black content, which was the heavy metals. So in the first photograph, there was a huge amount of heavy metals. The second photograph, there was less in it. And on the third one, when we, after a series of sessions, there was hardly any black in it at all.
That's really cool. I know I rattled off a bunch of examples. What did I miss? Can you think of some of your clients that are holistic health practitioners and how they utilize your system to help their patients or clients?
Yeah, one of them is massage therapists, of course, who do lymphatic drainage. And so this is a perfect supplement to use along with lymphatic drainage. And because the lymph drainage massage helps to get the circulation moving. And now you put them in the foot spa and you liberate that content that's been clogging them up, and you get it out.
So they would do the massage first and then
Yes.
have them sit and do the foot bath?
Yeah, and what happens when doing very deep tissue massages, like rolfing,
Mm-hmm.
that opens up, they literally are pulling the strands. I mean, if you want to have an all pain and some gain experience, I recommend it.
I love rolfing.
However, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you have to have a certain mindset to endure that torture session, which I have done. But what I found was, when I had it done, when he left, I mean, I had previously had it done, and I just ended up in an extreme acidosis state following it. I mean, the muscles were just screaming with lactic acid. But when I followed it with a detox foot spa, what occurred was I had no aftermath at all. And we learned this from my husband, who would go and do what I called zealot exercise classes. So he got his circulatory system really jazzed and moving. And then he would come home and have a detox foot spa, and boom, out would come amazing amount of content. So we found that when people hydrated and did exercise ahead of the session, or even like your infrared sauna ahead of having a session, or even having a colonic ahead. We had one client who was a colonic therapist, and she said she got at least a third more content out of the colon if she had done the client had done a foot spa prior to the colonic.
Whoa. Wow. That is impressive. I know that Dr. Klinghardt had at his Sophia clinic here in Woodinville, Washington. has a medical spa. It's not a day. It's not like a fun go get your nails painted spa. It's a it's like go get a colonic and a foot treatment um array. I'm sorry. What do I call it?
Detox
Detox.
foot spot.
Thank you. Yeah, go get a detox foot spa, which is he uses your
Yes.
system and the sunlight and the sauna and go get a colonic, and that's his kind of spa. So I know like more traditional doctor's kid, start adding these. They call it spots, so it's so funny. But yeah, it rejuvenates your entire body. So it's better than a facial. It's better than a manicure, pedicure.
Well, and it's really interesting because, from these clinics, these people, as I mentioned, were being sent to us that couldn't do any form of other detox because they go into overwhelm. Now, often these people were, as we talked about before, very chemically intolerant. They were very sensitive to all kinds of foreign chemistry, but also EMF sensitive. And so, one of the unique things about the way our system is designed is that it's actually designed for people with high EMF sensitivity. It has a special device on there to block out dirty electricity, and because it is such a soft, gentle release, because the body is choosing. See, it's not us like vacuuming out the body. So the big misconception in the world is that detox foot spas like chelation, and therefore it's pulling everything out of the body like chelation does. But it's not that. With our technology and the way that it's designed, because it's aligning behind the body, it's the body choosing what is being released each and every session. It is releasing what the body considers top priority at this time. So it's a priority release. And it is only doing it at the pace that the body is able to handle, because the body is doing the selectivity.
That's really exciting. So you make it easy for practitioners to have this in their clinic. I know you have a whole system and you set them up for success. Um, and then you have a version that's for the home use. What's the difference between the two?
Basically, it's just the basins. So the basin for the clinic use has the controls at the front of the basin and the back of the basin. It's just that what clinics found was it was a lot easier to have the controls at the front rather than reach behind the basin. But when you're a home user, and you're giving yourself a session, I call it self-serve, you you have to have the controls on the back wall behind your heels because you have to be able to reach them. So that's why the home model is designed. If you're doing the session by yourself and you're a solo person, then you can do the session for yourself. But if somebody else, a lot of people at home will actually choose the basin with we call it the PS1, is the one with the controls at both the front and the back. And a lot of people at home also prefer that design because it's just easier to give other members a session and have the controls at the front.
Oh, so it's kind of like buttons.
That's right.
Female and male buttons on a button-up shirt are different because women used to have someone else dress them or something. It's like the left hand, right hand. So it's just
I always found that odd.
right, right. Well, I think
It's
men
funny.
are supposed to dress themselves and women had other people dress them, and everyone's supposed to be right-handed, so they had to do that. It's
Uh,
silly. It's silly and
It is
archaic.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah, but this is just a convenience factor of
right.
of accessibility. And in the original design, we only had the controls at the back, and that was so that nobody else walking to the room would trip over and turn the session off.
Okay, got it. But you've made it easier now. Obviously, you took in feedback from practitioners
Yeah.
and you realized that the controls should be in the front. So I like that it's not like, well, the cheaper model is the home model or
Yeah, there's no difference. It again, the games that get played in the commercial world of this one's the industrial model and this one's the home model. Well, like, hello, you need the same technology for both. So to call one industrial and one not, our system is designed 4 clinics. Both of them are designed to be run back to back. So if you had a whole bunch, we had one family who had 8 children. We had one woman who was actually bought it to use, in her practice because she was a massage therapist. But when the 8 members of her family found out about it, she was spending all her time just doing her family members and didn't have hardly any time left for her clients.
That's amazing.
It's designed to be used, continuously. So there's no difference in the technology between the 2 different models. It's just the basin and convenience.
That's really cool.
And they both come with a carrying case, so it makes it super lightweight. Like the basin is just, weighs 2 pounds, and the carrying case is designed so the components actually fit right into it. So it weighs very little, and it's just a shoulder bag, and you can carry it anywhere.
Great, because when someone loves it, they're going to want to bring it with them to help their friends and family, or a practitioner that travels. So
Exactly.
that makes sense.
We have people who actually, on a home level, will take it back to their family. They've come from Europe originally, and they'll fly back with the system and do their family in Europe, because the other thing it has is a universal transformer on it, so you can use it in any country in the world, and you just need the wall plug as the difference.
Awesome. Very nice. Um, I know that you make yourself so available. So if someone who's listening is really interested in talking to you about getting one, either for their home, for their family, for themselves, or for their clinical use, should they be a health care provider, I know that you make yourself available to chat with them. We're going to have your contact information in the show notes. Your website's going to be the show notes, platinumenergysystems.ca. And you have so graciously provided a coupon code for our listeners. So anyone who's interested, definitely give Kellyann a call just to chat with her about it. Ask your questions. I know she really loves helping people. And the coupon code, if you were to just go straight to the website and buy the system for yourself, is LTH. I like to ask guests to always use the coupon code LTH. So now you don't have to remember a different coupon code for every single guest. So it's LTH, as in Learn True Health. You are giving us 15% off. That's so gracious. Thank you so much for providing that. For us. And because you're in Canada, those who are in the States will get a huge, deep discount right now, because the American dollar, is so strong at the moment compared to the Canadian dollar, which it always fluctuates, right? So,
Yes.
so just we can take great advantage of just the economy at the moment.
And there's one more bonus, and that's that because you're buying from Canada and you're in the United States, there's no tax.
Well, there you go. There you go. Excellent. Is there anything else that you would, and I'd love to always have you back on again. You're just a wealth of information. We could go on for hours. Before we get into the next topic, which I want to make sure we cover, is there anything else about your foot detox system that you'd like to share right now that we didn't get a chance to cover?
Yeah, actually, just one key point is that the mission of the company, is much broader than just selling a machine. Because of my background being a practitioner, the ambition behind the company is to teach wellness. So we really consider ourselves an educational organization. So we provide a lot of information for home users and practitioners. So from a practitioner point of view, we provide, the literature, newsletters, blogs, research, ongoing materials, everything that you need to do it as a business, we provide for you, and we just send you like, for example, the brochures in a PDF, and then customize the back page to your information. And we just send it as a PDF so that you can just print it up anytime you want. So we provide you a lot of information. We have a 100-page plus manual that has a lot of holistic information, articles to pass out to clients to help them understand. We have a toxicity guide helping them to understand how they got toxic, how to avoid toxicity, how to reduce it, um, how to make better lifestyle choices, and correlating, to the severity of toxicity, to the severity of symptoms. So we provide a lot of information. So the ambition of the company is to really teach wellness, and how do you get well. You focus on cellular health, so that, I've spent, I'm 61 years old now, and I've spent, since my early teens, being in the field of wellness, the focus of wellness. And so we, really highlight that information. But because we are also in such a network of people, such as Ashley is, we're connected with many different medical clinics, many practitioners, many home users, and they all have the issues that you're experiencing. So they tell us from their own life story what it is that they did that gave them the best results. And so we pass that information on to you on an individual level. So one of the things that I jokingly say is that I come in the box. So when when people purchase a system from us, we don't charge for initial training and ongoing support and customizing it to their specific use and their family's use in their clinic. And we provide that ongoing support to practitioners and clinics. And so there's a huge support aspect behind the company. So it's not just buy something in a box and see you never. We have an ongoing relationship, and so I have people phone me from all over, and giving me their insight, but also asking for insight. And so that's a huge part of the inclusion with this technology, because there's so many of us on the planet that are here to liberate the environment in which we're in. And right now, unfortunately, the reality of the world is that we are in a toxic environment, and there's toxic things that are happening in the world. But it doesn't mean that we're stuck there. It's the same as with a disease process in the body. This is only that the tide is out right now, but the tide will come back in again. And that's the real message that I want you to have in this moment of time, is that even though it seems, the darkest hour is before the dawn, and we are literally in a state on the planet of liberation. And yes, it seems like many bad things are happening, but it's because the dinosaur industries are dying, and that the old fort that has had power is in its last stance of fight. And so that's what we're experiencing at this time. But just like the body transitioning from a degenerative disease to a regenerative state, that is actually what is really occurring on the planet. The intensity of the experience that we're all here for, and we have signed up to be here at this time, to be part of this transition, to be part of this transformation. We're experiencing it personally, we're experiencing it professionally, and we're experiencing it globally. And it's an awesome time. I want everybody to realize that it is the most awesome time in all of history to be on the planet, because we are at such a pivotal point of transition.
I love what you just said. I absolutely love it. I am so happy to be here at this time to observe the world awakening as we're all doing. It's the age of information is allowing us, there's no barriers now. In the past, the mainstream media was the only way we could get information, right? And even books were not everyone could publish, right? It had to go through those major publications, and now anyone can publish a book. It's all the information's free. We're free flowing, and so people like you are able to share the miraculous ability for the body's ability to heal itself, and we can all begin to learn and shift our lifestyle for the better. I'd love to get into that. To wrap up today's interview, you had said at the beginning that you have healthy habits, so you'd love to
Yes,
teach us
yes.
to shift the daily environment so that we can stop putting the gasoline on the fire, right? Get the gunk out of our fish tank as best as possible. So I definitely urge. I'm excited to experience your foot detox system. I know my family will definitely benefit from it, and I'm really excited to hear also from the listeners who choose to try your system as well, because we're all here to learn and grow and experience. And please, all the listeners that do use this system, give me an email, connect with me, ashley@learntohealth.com. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your experience, just like the listeners who have gone on to try other things that I have said, hey, I'm giving this a try, like the magnesium foot soak, or the chlorella and the spirulina from Energy Bits, or the sunlight sauna. These are all things that I'm applying to my own personal health journey and seeing great results. And so I'm letting everyone know. And this foot bath is this foot detox is the next thing that I'm really excited to try, because I really want to get these heavy metals under control. And I'm seeing that this is, in conjunction with everything I'm doing, going to play a big role in my recovery of my health. So I'm very excited, and I'm very excited to help the listeners recover their health as well. So please email me, you guys. Let me know how it goes. I love hearing from you. I get almost daily emails from people telling me how these other things that I'm doing and sharing are working for them. So it's really exciting to hear that this stuff works, and it's working. It's helping people shape their lives. This wraps up part 1 of our 2-part interview with Kellyann. Stay tuned for part 2. She teaches some amazing tips for health. I know you'll just love them. Catch you soon in part 2, and have yourself a fantastic rest of your day.